The season isn't over yet, and I know the reactionaries are going to have a lot to say to me if Barcelona's results don't continue to stay consistently great or the club gets knocked out of the Europa League. But for those of us who are a little more level-headed and enjoying the ride right now, you know it's quite clear that this club has turned a corner and ahead of schedule. It wasn't that out there to think that Xavi would do well as the manager of FC Barcelona. And with his tactics and eye for detail, he had me as an early believer. But there was still a question on whether or not he had the right personality and could handle that kind of power. Sure, he was ready to go to Qatar and win some trophies for a properly funded team. But to be manager of FC Barcelona, a club stricken with financial troubles, and a team that was more used to being on the sideline and scoring goals, that was going to be a bit tougher. But I'm calling it, the sample size is enough. 2 months of good results is enough for me to say that it's ahead of schedule, and kudos to everybody who was involved in his appointment, but Xavi Hernandez has fixed FC Barcelona. And let's get into some of those reasons why. One is health. It was out of his control, but a bit in his control as well. It's the return of Dr. Picard Pruna, returned to the Camp Nou after a few years away. I know I fall for this thinking, but you'd assume that sports science is where it is, and most doctors would do the same thing. And while that might be somewhat true, there is probably a general consensus on most injuries and the best way to help a player recover. But with the increased number of games players are playing, the emphasis on management is becoming more and more important every season. And it seems like Dr. Pruna is a step above those that tried to replace him. Anto has been the big question mark, but under Xavi and Pruna, there was just that one big setback in extra time of the Spanish Supercopa that all parties have admitted was the wrong choice. But Piqué has been healthy, Dembélé has been healthy, Alba has remained healthy, Pedri hasn't been re-injured, and Busquets has been the mark of durability. With almost a full squad and very few missing through injuries, Xavi's ideas have a bit more muscle behind them. I want to thank OneFootball for sponsoring this video. OneFootball is the app I use to keep myself up to date on all things FC Barcelona, everything I need to know, as well as check on every other team that Alemany could be scouting right now for a big summer transfer window. With a custom-tailored homepage, stay up to date with breaking news, live scores, and even transfer news. While on the go, you can check with matches in live time and watch videos afterwards. Use the link in the description for a free download of OneFootball on Android or iOS to put all of your football in one place. And you'll help out a tiny Barca channel too. Thanks to OneFootball again for sponsoring this video. Now back to the Barca business. Reason 2 is players that fit. Speaking of a full squad, that January transfer window certainly changed everything now, didn't it? It's also another thing that was a bit outside his control, but I also have to give him a lot of credit for what seems like for the first time in many, many years, there is a board and a manager that are working in tandem, where the board listens to what the manager is looking for, and the manager gives suggestions on certain players that may be available that he hopes would help bolster his squad. And in January, that led to the arrival of a speedy, experienced center forward, a speedy right winger, a fantastic space-finding and tactically skillful young versatile forward, and a dressing room leader who can play at right back or invert in the middle of the field. I did a video right when those 4 arrived, giving grades, and I want to update that a little bit. Aubameyang has certainly been an A+. I'm going to give Ferran and Dani Alves an A, and Adama Traore gets an A- just because he's been a bit out of form the last week or two once opponents seem to figure him out a little bit more. Kool-Aid's always talked about the difference that Edgar Davids made coming in January of 2004 and turning that season around, but this is without question the best January transfer window of all time. That line will be pushed even farther if the team captured the Europa League and ends the season with a title. And give it 2 more Barcelona wins and 2 more losses for Real Madrid, and maybe we'll start to talk about the Liga trophy, but that's for a later time. Reason 3 is be the boss. There were questions about how Xavi would deal with his old mates, his old friends, his old compatriots, Piqué, Alba, Busquets, even Dani Alves. What would his treatment of them be? Well, the answer is better than expected even. Busquets has been rotated and is doing what he does well without being exposed on too many counters. Piqué is leading the back line and looking great closing down space. Alba has been sensational on the left and undroppable, honestly. And Alves was kept out of the Europa League squad. So much for favoritism. The way that players are given opportunities, and I'm looking directly at Araujo and Eric Garcia here, seems to be based on performance. When Eric was struggling defending for a few games, he was on the bench. After Araujo struggled with his distribution heading into Galatasaray, Eric started and did well. Dest couldn't find a game under Xavi at the start, then looked just fine when he finally got some game time before his injury. This meritocracy seems fair, and it makes it a lot easier on the players to know exactly why they are or aren't playing and how to get back into the team. That was one of the biggest gripes about recent Barca managers. It seems like they never had the job security, because they didn't, to play players based on merit. They had to play the big price tag players to make the board's purchases make sense. And they were also forced to play the veterans that they believed would use their experience to get them results, as in help them keep their jobs. Unfortunately, Xavi has much more power and pull than that. 4 is a system that works. I can get hung up a lot on formation and those numbers, whether it's a 3-4-3, 3-5-2, 4-3-3. But for Xavi, it's less about those numerical numbers and more about the system that he has put in place, those tactics, and the roles that players are playing. I've said that Xavi would eventually move to a 3-4-3, which looking at the moves for Christensen and Kessié could be in the cards next season, but his tactics in a 4-3-3 compared to Koeman's are a big reason why this team is making sense. The wingers are wider, constantly on the touchline, which pushes the interiors farther forward, a reason why Pedri and Gavi are getting more shots off. The outside backs are expected to invert more, but this is a gradual thing. Dest isn't there yet, and Araujo is not expected to do that when he lines up at right back. The times when things haven't worked as well is when Gavi has played as a left winger or Araujo struggles as a center back to progress the ball with either dribbling or a pass. Once somebody isn't necessarily doing the thing the system is asking for, there are struggles elsewhere. It's not necessarily on the players themselves though. Just the 2 I mentioned. Gavi is out of position and Araujo's ball playing is improving, but not at the level when the opposition is in a low block. And their main focus is forcing Araujo into those situations, because Barca have few other weaknesses to try to exploit. But I do trust those in the know who have mentioned that Xavi's individual work, as in those video calls, those meetings, talks before and after practice, he has a belief that he can improve each individual player. Frankie de Jong and Serginho Dest on the positional play, Araujo his passing out of the back, and even the veterans, figuring out how to get them back to his best. And so far, Xavi, being a work in progress, is working in the right direction. And finally, 5 is belief. This team has scored 4 goals 6 times in 2 months. Taking a page out of the Feminese book, it's not that the men feel as inevitable as the women do, but there certainly is that one variable that you see with this Feminine team that this men's team was missing for a while. And that is that belief. That belief is why people are saying this team is back. This team can score when they want to, that they're never out of a game, that the game plan is working, and if they trust it and each other, they will win the match. That belief was nowhere to be found against Atletico Madrid earlier in the year, or against Benfica, or Rayo Vallecano, or Real Betis. But that belief is there now. A Europa League title would be something to calm me about the nerves of a difficult European night, but the real test will come next season back in the Champions League. Conquering Real Madrid in El Clasico for the first time in 3 years goes a long way for this team's mentality. And I'd say there's just 1 or 2 more hurdles to go. At the present moment though, this team couldn't have much more belief in themselves and each other. And Xavi and his staff get a lot of the credit for that. Shorter games, but higher intensity in training, finding the third man, constantly preaching his principles. It's evident the team is having fun in training again. They're competing, being intense in training while having fun. And that fun, that intensity, that competition is bleeding into everything this team does. To wrap things up, a win or loss, in case you want to come back to this video, is not going to change my mind about the things I've just said. The way back for this squad was long and winding, taking multiple years. And one blip against Sevilla is just, to me, going to be more tape and more mistakes to review to improve upon for Europa League nights and the rest of this Liga season. This team is on an upward trajectory, as I hope this channel is as well. So make sure you give us a like, subscribe so you don't miss any of our content here. And as always, until next time, Forza Barca.